What's up, everybody? This is Greg Horry with another episode of my podcast, Once It Clicked, where I sit down with makers, creators, and innovators in the mechanical keyboard community to explore their stories and to learn about their design processes. This week, I'm really excited to share my conversation with Robert, the creator behind Clackeys Brand Keycaps. With many years of experience in the entertainment industry as a character modeler and 3D designer, working on notable projects such as Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy and James Cameron's Avatar, Robert brings his expertise of both design and business and applies it to Clackeys. Beginning with ideas inspired by nostalgic films from the 1980s and 1990s, Robert continues to explore what's possible for keycaps by experimenting with modular designs, different materials, and even collaborating with esports companies like Team Liquid and Riot Games. In our chat, among the many things we talked about, he shares about his background prior to finding the hobby and his ultimate goal, to bring the world of entertainment into the world of mechanical keyboards. I had a blast talking with Robert and walked away with many different ideas to chew on, so I hope all of you get as much out of this conversation as I did. Please enjoy. Yo, Robert, thanks for making the time to talk today. Just to start, there are so many things I'm excited to get into today, from your journey building your business Clackeys to what it is now, your experience modeling and designing in your professional career even before Clackeys, and also what's got you excited these days and also looking forward. Before we dive into all of that, I wanted to first ask you about your decision to pursue modeling in art. Can you tell me about the first time you knew that this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on. I'm super glad to be here. As my employees like to say, they say I like to talk, so maybe this will be a pretty fun podcast, or maybe people will hang up. I don't know. But yeah, my journey is an interesting one. So like if we go back in time to where it all started, I started modeling in high school. High school for me was 1999, 2000, and 2001. I started modeling in it's a program called Studio Max, like 2.0 or like 1.0. It was like super early version. And I think what really got me into it, I was a big Counter-Strike head back then. CS 1.6 was like my jam, so I played that like every day after school on my like home built PC. As I like neared my like end of high school, my like childhood friend down the street told me, he's like, "Hey, I'm going to this trade school. They have an audio engineering program, and they also have like a 3D design program." And I was like, "Oh, that's really cool. I'll check it out." And then it's like, yeah, I want to do, I already knew I wanted to do computer stuff in general, but that was like the first time I thought about, oh, what am I going to do to take that sort of hobby at the time and turn it into something that I can make a career out of. So I was like really big into playing games, and I was a big film person too. So yeah, I joined up with the school same time as my buddy, and I learned like 3D modeling. And I graduated when I was 19, so I was super young, and I was definitely like at the top of my class. I was probably like one of 4 competitive modelers out of the school. It was really early on, so like it was like a lot of luck, really. Looking back now, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got hired for anything. But that's like the journey of art in growth, I guess, is that you should always look back at the past art and you think it should be garbage. So that tells you that you're going somewhere at least. And so, yeah, I got a job right out of school working at Tippett Studio, which is a Bay Area film company. They are probably most recognized for doing like the Matrix sequels, and they did a lot of like late 80s stuff, like puppet style animatronics, things for like Jurassic Park. So I came in to work on just some like low budget version of Starship Troopers, was like the first movie. And that was like the beginning of my modeling journey. And I think what really made me want to become a modeler was I was just like blown away by watching movies with special effects. I think my dad always watched like special effects driven movies with me too. So that was something that always interested me, but I never knew like how they actually did it. And so I think a big motivator was to learn how they did that stuff.
You touch on several things I'm curious to explore. You mentioned your progression, early interest starting with these movies and then going on to learning in high school where you dove in and ultimately finding this career path through the trade school where you eventually get hired in the industry.
Yeah.
I'm curious to ask, you said you had this inspiration to pursue modeling based off your experience and exposure to special effects in movies. Mm-hmm. Was this something you were intrinsically motivated to do, or did you have encouragement from your parents or your friends?
Yeah, I think it was intrinsic. I mean, I was like a pretty good high school student. I wasn't like great or poor, kind of like right in the middle, you know? And like while all my friends were taking like SATs and like thinking about colleges, or like what to do after high school, it was like junior, senior year, I was actually starting to formulate like, hey, what should I do? Right. Cause I was like never much in the mindset that I was going to go to a college. Yeah. It was just, it just kind of clicked like I don't know, like, I don't really remember the moment, but there was like a transitional time where I went from wanting to play games and watch movies to wanting to make them. And to me, that happened, you know, maybe over the course of a summertime. It just kind of happened. And then this opportunity to go to the school kind of fell in my lap, and I'm like, that's exactly what I should do. That's exactly me. It's not normal at the time. This is like, trade schools were far and few between. There was Full Sail in Florida. There was Academy of Art, which was a much, much smaller program than it is today. And then there was the one I went to, which is called Expression Center in Emeryville, California. So, you know, and there's probably a handful of others. I think Noman School of Visual Effects, I think, existed. They were down in LA, but to me, that was a bit far from family. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't really remember the transition or like exactly how it happened, but it basically went from wanting to play and watch to absorb to wanting to create that same thing. And then that was like my, you know, opportunity to move out of high school, get into some higher education and pursue this lifestyle of, you know, working in the film industry or video game industry, you know, one or the other. I wasn't being picky at the time.
I hear you say it was a natural progression where this opportunity to learn more about what you're passionate for fell into your lap.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing that, and it sounds like a huge decision to not go the tradition, or what I think would be the traditional route of education. And
right.
It feels like a big decision.
Yeah, I think it's like a personality thing. I don't really put a lot of weight in a lot of decisions, and maybe that's like a blessing and a curse for me, but I think to me it was pretty simple in that it was cheaper. You know, my higher education cost me like 20 grand, right? So it was cheap and it was to the point. You know, I was always like how can I get this done in the best and quickest way possible kind of mindset. So it just made the most sense for me to go to something like that if I didn't go to that school, I probably wouldn't have gone to college at all and just been like self-taught. But at the time, YouTube was like barely a thing. It was around, but the tutorial opportunities on there were pretty poor. Like if you fast forward to today, you could teach yourself literally everything that I got taught in that school for basically free. So, we're at a different point in time where knowledge is abundant and more or less free than when I started. There wasn't really a platform for it yet.
I hear that. And that's one thing I'm curious to ask more about later in terms of learning and different resources available. First, what was your parents' reaction to your decision to pursue modeling?
Yeah, I think they're all for it. Yeah, they were. I think my mom always had this like pretty laid back attitude. She's just like, do whatever you want. And that was persistent all through school too, which is why my grades were mediocre, never like excel, and I never like excelled at it because it was more about enjoying life, I guess. And she was kind of for that, and letting me like find my passion. So I guess like a little fun fact is towards the end of high school, I was actually really big into making hip hop. So I was in a rap group with my friends in school.
Yo.
That was so it was like I was constantly either working on music and like my 3D art. So I was always A-Bing those two things.
Yo, that's so interesting. I mean, I'm trying to picture myself in high school. My background, I'm Japanese American, and it was very much part of my culture to focus on education.
Yeah.
Go to school, get your degree, get a job. And hearing this, looking at where I'm now as I'm making keycaps, you're right. It could have been a lot more efficient of a process instead of going to school by just teaching myself on my own.
Yeah. It's, parents have, our studio is like 70% staffed by students from UC Davis, or students that have graduated. And it's been pretty cool and interesting to kind of see like what their parents kind of expected them to do going into their college years. And there's a clear, like, we have employees that are, like in science tracks or, something other than art related while they're working here because their personal goals are art related. So like their professional track, in the university is like polar opposite, if you will, of the artistic element. And a lot of that is parental driven. So, there's a lot of kids that go into college with their parents setting a certain expectation for what they should do with their time in college, or like what programs they should take. And I don't know how to say this, like nationality plays a big part of those decisions. Same thing with my wife. She was, she's a Vietnamese descent. So she had a lot of certain types of pressure of doing certain types of things into college. At least even just going to college too.
Yeah. Culture's huge.
Culture's huge. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of weight there.
The pressure and expectation, as you said. You mentioned your growing studio and expanding business, which is another topic I want to explore in the future. Before that, when you're going into trade school at Expression Center, you developed these skills and you came in with your experience modeling in high school and you finished at the top of your class. What would you attribute that success to? Was that your previous experience modeling? Did you have a certain drive or dedication? I heard you say luck, but the results speak for themselves in some way.
Yeah, I think, I had a really good buddy, Jeremy, in college. And we both kind of came into the school with like almost one-to-one goals. And so having like a partner to kind of work next to and like motivate and like push that personal artistic bar, like he would do something awesome and then that would make me want to do something more awesome. It's competitive in a sense too, because you don't want to suck and you don't want him to be better than you, right? So there's like this natural competition that we like had for each other and to develop our skills. So I mean, dude, like when I was in college, my work schedule would be crazy. Like they had way better computers at the school than I had at home, and the school was open 24 hours. So you could go into any time of the day or night, and with your like electronic badge and go use their computer lab. So there would be weeks where we would be working on projects that there was one time it was the most crazy. I would wake up at 9 p.m., 9 or 10 p.m. I would drive over to the school about 20 minutes. I drive over to the school for 20 minutes. I'd wake up at 9 p.m. I'd work until like 3 or 4 a.m. I'd fall asleep in my chair until class started at 9 a.m. I'd wake up in my chair. I'd go clean up in the bathroom. I would do my class until 2 o'clock or so. It'd be a couple different classes. Then I would work until like 6 or 7 p.m. I'd come home and I would eat dinner. I'd go to bed and I'd wake up again and do it all over again. And I would do that for 5 days in a row. We probably did that for like months. It was pretty ridiculous.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah. So like there was a point where like, dude, I mean, when you're trying to render your models, like, I mean, we're talking about computers that were like 1 gigahertz, right? Like our cell phones today are faster than the computers we had back then. So, you know, our computers had like 1 gigabyte of RAM. And they're like 1 gigahertz. You know, the video cards would be in the megabytes of memory. Like, so anything that you wanted to do to like make your models look good took 9 hours to do like 1 single frame of rendering. So sometimes it was like babysitting renders. There's also like they had a computer set up to do like a render farm. So like, you know, those after hours times you could like sneak in and use all the computers to do a render of a turntable of your character. Yeah, there's just, you know, there's so many components to it. You know, there'd be nights where we would just like kick off a ton of renders and then we'd play Counter-Strike, or what game was popular then. I think we got into like Medal of Honor. It was pretty fun. Yeah, so we'd definitely play too. You know, it'd be a mix. You'd work your ass off for a while and then you go play for a couple hours and kind of go back and forth.
Even with that ballot, I mean, how are you even sustaining yourself with that crazy level of activity?
I don't know. I was like 20 years old, man. You know, no, I was like 18. I was like 18 or 19 years old. Yeah, I was 19 years old. You know, it would be like the drink of choice. We were drinking, I don't know if it's still around. It was called Balls, BAWLS.
The blue bottle.
The blue bottle. Yeah. Dude, I would have like 12 packs of those. Like, it was ridiculous. I wasn't just fuel up. And, you know, I did get my sleep in. I mean, like, I'd split my sleep like 4 and 4 or something like that. So it would just be kind of like awkward. Sleep quality was probably on the range of like bad to poor, but it was still there.
I was recently talking with Nick Sledge Kid about swapped sleep schedules, where we both experienced waking up in the evenings like 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m.s and getting started when the sun's about to go down. So I hear you on that.
Yeah.
I'm curious, both in when you were at Expression Center and when you started your professional modeling career,
yeah,
how did each environment, or how did they teach you different aspects of design, or how did they create cultivate creativity? Because it seems like to me, I mean, like I've basically learned in high school sculpture class and tinkered on my own, but it seems like a hard thing to teach someone how to create art.
Yeah, I mean, art comes with the word art in general, I think comes with a lot of weight. There's always that question, what is art? And art comes in many forms, right? Some people look at some art and don't think it's art. So I think the first step is like when I first started working in production, I think the thing that I had to realize really quickly, looking back now, it may not be 100% true, but when you're working in production, you have to kind of think or tell yourself that you're not really making art, because your job as a modeler at the time was to create somebody else's vision. And so while you might have your, what I call like small wins when you're working on a movie. So one of the first movies I worked on was Starship Troopers 2. And then after that was Hellboy, with Guillermo del Toro and Ron Perlman, classic Hellboy. And so the bulk of the work I would do would be like modeling like a window that's going to break, or or some environment pieces that are just like background stuff or complementary to whatever's actually happening on the movie. I did get to do some bugs for Starship Troopers 2, that were like based off of this designer, Craig Hayes, who's like a master creature designer. He designed like pretty much everything that was badass back in the 90s and the early 2000s. And so like you're really kind of a technician in a sense. You're learning the skills to like translate one thing to another, or I wouldn't say like copy. I mean, it is kind of you're trying to copy something, but yeah, you're kind of like a translator. You're translating a vision, you're translating a concept from one medium to the next. A lot of times we would work with people who would sculpt in clay, and then we would translate that clay sculpture to digital so it can be animated, right? Pixar worked that way for a long time, actually.
Oh.
They do all their character sculpts in clay, and then they would like scan them and then digitize them. So the modeling job at Pixar for freaking forever was like to basically trace over a clay sculpture. And so there was very little creativity there as a modeler in the early stages of this sort of career path. Now that is completely 180 now. It's opposite. A modeler nowadays at any given studio is much more in the driver's seat of being artistic than they were 20 years ago. Let's get back to the question. Creating art. Yeah, so I guess it's like I wasn't really creating art at the time, but I was training my eye would be like the right way to kind of describe that growth at that time. Learning to see is kind of like the beginning of any artistic endeavor, I think.
Whoa. Two things. You mentioned you developed this perspective where you accepted your role as a modeler, not necessarily to make art, more to realize the creative vision of someone else. While you're doing this, you're also developing your own ability to see different design concepts or understand what looks good.
Mm-hmm.
How did that align with your expectations when coming out of school? Because I imagine you're creating your own projects, working on your own projects when you're at Expression Center.
Yeah.
Then when you're going into industry, it seems like a pretty big shift.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was a big shift. So, like, when I worked in the Expression Center, you're kind of taught in this sort of narrow telescope of workflow where, like, you would work with a concept artist who's, like, the creative vision of something. And then you would create a 3D version of that and do your best to translate that artwork into 3D. So like I was expecting to do something similar when I went to work professionally, where they would have like the art team go and give us artwork to build stuff off of. And that art team could be 2D concepts, 3D concepts. And so it was more in line of, it was pretty close to what I expected. I think I was so, for the first like few years of my career, it was like going back to college again, where I would learn new stuff every day, new technologies, new workflows. Like you're surrounded by basically experts of the industry that have been there for 20 years, right? So at that point, there's people working there longer than I've been alive. So it was like there was so much to learn every single day that I wasn't ever really concerned that I'm not like making art, because there's so many skills and so much pressure to learn to catch up to these amazing artists that are already there. So it never really, I was never something that I worried about in terms of like expectations versus reality. That sets in much later in your career, of like where you kind of take a step back and you realize, what am I actually doing? Right.
Yeah. I see similarities with myself, as we talked a little bit about before recording, where I was working a civil engineering job straight out of college.
Right.
And it was really exciting learning about all of the new planning methods, the new techniques. And it got to the point where I began to question my future, looking at the leaders of our company and seeing if that lifestyle aligned with what I wanted for myself. And eventually I came to the decision that I wanted to leave. I'm curious what that process looked like for you. You kind of alluded to it as you progressed through industry, the way you felt about your situation changed.
Yeah, I think it's, that journey was like 15 years in the making. So it's it is going from like A to Z for sure. But I think there was a point where I was working at DreamWorks Animation from 2013 to 2015. And me and my old business partner, Edward, we started talking about like just business in general. Like, what are we going to do to secure our lifestyle and our careers after this, right? And because working in production on movies, like you can just see this trend where eventually you age out of being in a position to be competitive, or you get lucky, you're like one of the 50 that can like move up into a role where you're more of a supervisor and you do less work or art and you just sort of manage, right? So, I was like barely 30 at the time, so I wasn't really too concerned of it, but I knew that there was like that end point. And it just really started getting me thinking of like, okay, is there something more interesting that I've ever wanted to pursue that is not just 3D modeling for movies? And I kind of had like this like warpy flashback feeling of like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to get into toy making. And then I remembered how into toys I was when I was working at Weta Digital in New Zealand. I started getting into vinyl characters and toys. Kid Robot was like, I was like really inspired by they're like these toy makers, how they like convey different characters in like such simplistic shapes. It was really interesting to me. Polar opposite of my style. I'm very like more of a gritty and realistic stylistically driven artist, I guess. So it's opposite of what I ever did. So I really appreciated the simplicity, if you will. So I was like, oh, I have all this training in 3D, and like finally 3D printing is good, like from a consumer level. or like a prosumer. It's basically that transition from typewriter to computer and printer. You know, there was that point in time. It's 2010, 2011 that this happened. I was like, I want to make characters with my 3D printer. And that was kind of like the first time I ever thought about not just working in movies and production, but like doing something that's an outlier or different than everything that I've already trained to do.
Was that a new desire? I hear you say when you were initially interested in modeling, you had this influence from your curiosity with special effects, and it was combined with this drive to learn new methods and also to compete with your friends and peers.
Yeah.
Was this always part of your growth in your process, or had you always had this motivation to create something of your own?
I think that, you know, that started to happen when I would say that I actually started getting good as an artist. So I would say that if you were to like kind of put a little timeline together from like the early stages of my career till about 2008, I was a pretty basic modeler. I wasn't very good. I wasn't really good with characters. And I wasn't good at anatomy. And so when I went to work at Weta Digital, which I got really lucky that I got that job. When I first started, I was doing like trees and rocks and environmental background. And then I saw these other sculptors, digital sculptors, doing like the Navi for Avatar and doing creatures. And I was like, fuck, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. I thought I could do it, but then I'm seeing like the bar now, like in my face of like where I was, you know, if anybody's listening, put the bar like at your waist, you know, and then the bar that these guys were like, you know, Kobe, you know, like they're above me. So I was like, okay, I got to get my ass in gear and start going back to school. And so that was when I made the transition from being like a basic 3D modeler to what we call in the industry a character artist. And so every single day after work, I would work 10 hours a day. I would go home and start sculpting digitally on my own work. And I started off with doing characters. Like I started basically making fan art of things that I enjoyed. So I like doing like night elves from World of Warcraft. I started doing like creatures. I started practicing sculpting people. Humans in particular are one of the hardest things to do right in CG. So I started studying anatomy, and like I worked my ass off like literally every day after work because I was back in school, right back at it. And then I was like, okay, that's what I want to make. I want to be able to make these characters. And the conceptual point of a character was like the hard part for me. I was like not really ready to do my own ideas. But so what I went back to what I know is like, okay, I could look at these things online and do my version of that. And so I started training I had my eye training again to like that translation of what I see into like a new format. That was like the big point. And then I was like, okay, once I got all these character stuff done, the idea of toys and figures and fine art sculptures started kind of enter my reality as like a possibility, but I never really thought too much into it yet at that point.
I'm fascinated about your process for learning or relearning your character modeling specifically. One thing I've been kind of tinkering with is 3D modeling, and it's pretty foreign to me. So when I hear you say you're relearning these skills with your intent to develop these characters to be on the same tier as the people who are making avatars, seems challenging.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine, I mean, you're saying you go from designing trees and the environment to these characters. How did you structure your study sessions after work? Yeah,
so everything I did was project based. So it's a little foggy for me now, but I was like, okay, I'm going to make my own like night elf character, female night elf with like a bow, or no, I think she had a staff. Yeah, staff. And so I was like, I'm going to make this project. I kind of have like an idea for it. So what I started doing is just coming up with an idea. My wife actually helped me with the original concept. And I would just go from like start to finish, do the full character, do her outfit, do the environment, you know, and then render it all. And so that was like the first time I did like a character that had like semi good, like human anatomy from top to bottom. That was like trying to be at the level of the people that I'm working next to. And then I would go to work and I would like ask questions. I would look at their stuff. And then I just started creating these projects, back to back. Like I'd finish one. Trying to say that something's finished has always been it's always a struggle, like from an artistic point of view, saying like, this is done. Even if it doesn't look great, you got to say this is done, and you have to do it again, because you can really get caught in this trap of like fixing what you've already made. And what you're really doing is you're fixing the last like 5% of this piece of art, where the real goal, I realized pretty quickly, is that you want to be able to take, say you paint a character, and that first time you paint her, it gets to like 90%. Let's say 100 is like the best best painting you could ever make in your entire life, right?
Yes.
Let's just say that's your goal. And you paint it the first time around and you get to like 85%. You're going to spend, let's say, a week getting it from 0 to 85, and a month going from 85 to 90, and 6 months from 90 to 100. But if you start over and just go at it again, you're going to go spend another couple weeks from 0 to 89%. You know, you're going to make that 3% difference just by doing the whole thing over again, because your fundamentals are going to be better. Your eye is going to be better. The mistakes that you made on your last one, you're less likely to repeat those again. So the goal is to get from 0 to 100% the first time around. Is close to that last end game visual that you're going for. You want to get as close as possible, because you're going to like really kill yourself getting that last 5% to be like, this is the best thing I've ever made. And only to realize 6 months later that 100% that you thought you achieved is really like, 50% of what your real potential is.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
You got to just have this cut off and be like, okay, this looks pretty cool. I'm proud of it. Move on. And in a year or two, you're going to look back and you'll be like, I can't believe I drew that. I can't believe I made that. It looks terrible. So you really got to get out of this like loop of trying to make something the best thing that you ever possibly can. You want to push yourself. You want to get there. You want to try to get there, but set a stop point. So that was like my routine day in and day out. It's like, I did this project. I tried to make it as best I could. Like when I finally did the renders, you'd look at it and you're like, oh, her feet are too big, or like her hands don't look quite right. Man, you can spend months trying to fix that kind of stuff. So go on and don't make her feet the wrong size like the next time around. Don't make her hands too big next time around, right? Then you already fixed 10% of that issue on that one on your next character, or your next design.
Yeah. It sounds like you were very intentional about how you practiced and developed that ability to accept your work, move on, and understand you're growing and improving your craft.
Yeah, I think a lot of that came from being in production, where you're basically being told by the producers, the directors, of saying, it's good enough, let's go to the next shot. So, you got to know like what your target audience is and if they're going to notice or if they're even going to care. So, I mean, it's insane to think that if you watch like a basic movie, movies nowadays have so much special effects, but if you go back in time, there used to be like 30 seconds of special effects in, say, like a movie, and a studio would spend 6 months on that 30 seconds. Wow. Right? So think about that concept. You spend 6 months of your life to do 30 seconds of visual effects in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
the director wanted something to fly across the screen. That's, a month of modeling time. It's, 2 weeks of compositing. It's a month of rendering. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, and then the viz dev behind it, all the animation is another 4 weeks, right? It all gets added on, and you actually spend 6 months on this, on 30, right? And you wonder like why movies take so long. It's like, well, stuff like that. It's better nowadays. It's not as bad, but you think about a 30-second commercial you see like during the NFL. Those are usually like 3-month projects. I've done a lot of commercial work as a freelancer on things, and you work on a 15-second ad for 2 months. So you get really used to saying that's good enough. Let's go. Yeah.
That reminds me of something one of my friends mentioned about working on projects. I think it was in software, where he said typically the first 90% of the project takes 90% of the time, and the second 10% takes your other 90% of the time.
Yes.
Or it's not linear at all.
No.
I want to ask about your learning process more for developing your skill for character modeling. If you were to go back and relearn, or if you were to help someone else learn this process, would you do it differently? Or would you still encourage yourself to have this project-focused approach to develop that eye?
I think there's so many like formats of learning, and I think that one style of learning isn't applicable to everybody. Like I noticed that I learn by doing, and I learn by being very hands-on. Some people learn in more abstract ways, like, you might be able to read a book and then go do it. For me, I need to be more visual, or like I need to see somebody do it. Like when I was learning how to do coding and scripting for a while, which was another part of my job description as a modeler sometimes. I had a book on like how to code, and it was really hard for me to learn. But when I started watching videos on people scripting and coding, it was much easier for me seeing them like type it out in front of me. So that just made me think, okay, I'm like definitely a visual learner. So I think you just have to kind of it's a little bit of being self-aware of like, how do you learn best? And then after that, it's just practice, and like how you practice it. It's a term that's probably like used in many industries, but it's this idea of like, if you spend 10,000 hours doing it, by the time you reach that 10,000 hours, you're going to be an expert, or you're going to be really good at it. And I think I just like accidentally did all that. I just started working for a lot of hours, doing a lot of stuff for different projects. And I guess I was just always looking at what is the easiest way to keep me motivated. And the easiest way that I found to stay motivated to work on projects is to go make things that I'm passionate about at the time. So I think at this time, like I was like super into Blizzard cinematics. I did have at one point like high hopes to going and working at Blizzard Cinematics. That was kind of one of my goals. So I was like, I want to do that. So I'm going to make that. And that was like my goal, right? So I guess for me is just constantly working on things that gave me that drive that I couldn't necessarily muster up myself. Like that is just staying true to being like a fan and an artist at the same time. Yeah.
I hear that. It's like really tapping into what inspired you, what you feel most energetic, most motivated about, and then pursuing and developing that.
Yeah, it's true.
Making a little sidestep, thinking about the lines of teaching and learning, I saw you were part of a company called Mold 3D.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, definitely. That was the first company. I kind of mentioned it, that I started that at DreamWorks with my old business partner, Edward. And that's right at this time where we started getting into 3D printing. I was an instructor for an online school, which is that name Mold3D, and we started doing like online education, and we did workshops to teach people how to take their 3D modeling skill sets and bring them into like it was a very technical class. So you're basically taking someone's art background and creating characters and saying, these are all the things that you need to learn and do before you can start 3D printing out your characters at home or with like 3D printing service providers. And so that was kind of like the early stages of that company, is basically 3D printing education for character designers. And I won't talk too much about that company or my own company, but what that did do for me is that it gave me like a sense of like being a business owner and learning how to do everything myself or with my business partner. And, you know, my wife says it was like a failed business, and in many ways it was, right? But kind of a cool fact, after I left, Edward managed to like steer the company into like a really cool direction, and they got to work on The Mandalorian as a visual effects studio. So whoa. It kind of like went a different route than the original dream of the company.
Yeah.
Which started off in like 3D printing and education into like some internal like, you know, networking. I mean, me and Edward and we're basically veterans in the industry, and we have a ton of connections. So if you kind of maintain good relationships with everybody, you'll always kind of find a place for what you want to do. So he really wanted to go into like cinematics and like production, I guess. And so, yeah, so they got to do like a ton of stuff on Mandalorian. And so that's a pretty amazing thing to see happen with something that I helped start, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think the lesson there is like, you don't pigeonhole yourself as a company or as an artist. Like, you know, you can always find opportunity if you're just willing to look.
I hear your wife maybe jokingly say your business venture was a failure. And at the same time, one framework I've heard is that if you can learn something or develop relationships from any pursuit, then one can consider it a success. And it sounds like you had that experience.
Yeah, it's like, I think the way to put it would be like, financial failures are usually intellectual successes. Right?
I like that. It's still a growth opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, through that time of that quote unquote failure, I made a ton of friends. I helped a lot of students become like really amazing like sculptors and 3D printing. 3D printing is kind of a terrible word because it sounds so like technical. Like nobody calls someone who's a writer, like an author, like a printsmith, or you know what I mean? So I think that title is a little bit tainted. But you know, I helped a lot of people like find their career path in entertainment art and in character work that uses 3D printing as like the way to output that artwork, right? The printer is merely a machine that reproduces things that you create digitally. So the artwork in 3D printing isn't the printer as much as your HP laser printer is not the author of a book. So it's been an interesting journey there, and I learned a lot about business, networking, like having a clear structure to keep going, and a lot of these things I learned from my business partner because this was his second business. He was a co-founder of this visual effects studio and art studio called Massive Black. They're based out of San Francisco. So I learned a lot from him. And then so a lot of that helped Clackeys transition from being a garage company to more or less a properly run business entity.
I'm stoked to dive into Clackeys. Before that, one thing I'm really curious, partly why I brought it up for Mold 3D, is it sounds like this combo where you have your drive to learn business and the opportunity to educate people. Mm-hmm. And I've watched some of your streams, and you have a bunch of YouTube videos too. And when you're describing your process, it sounds like you have this intention to educate, where you talk about the zygomatic arch for your one-eyed Willy, or you have different painting techniques like dry brushing and wet brushing.
Right.
Where does this drive to educate people about your craft, or to, as you say, help others learn and find their creative paths? Where does this stem from?
I think it just is sort of like a natural thing that I do now, because when I first started, when I was at DreamWorks, I was asked if I wanted to teach any online classes, character modeling and character sculpting. And I think I said no, or like I didn't really feel like I had time or was ready to do it. When we started Mold 3D, the idea was to do in-person workshops, and I was going to be one of the instructors. And so there was a lot of pressure there this is the first time I ever thought, okay, as I do, I have to tell what I'm doing. And so I never did that before. I never had to. There was elements of it as I worked at when I was working at Sony Computer Entertainment on some games there. I was in a more senior position, so I would help some junior modelers out with like learning how to do different sculpting things or like anatomical things, and I would talk a little bit while I'm modeling. But that was the first time in that education setting that I would like be the instructor and talk through as I work. And that was like a huge learning curve, because, you know, most people can't talk as they do. It's not natural. So I got okay at it, I guess, like teaching these things as I'm like sitting there in front of 30, 40 people. And then I went on to do an online class. I did a pre-recorded video of like hours of lectures. I think it was 8 lectures, an hour each of that. It was all pre-recorded. Took me flipping forever to edit it down so it's like coherent, right? So yes. Then you also learn, okay, if I can get to the point while I'm modeling and talking, then the less editing I have to do later. So, you know, I got better at trimming down my thoughts into like things that really were the bullet point things that needed to be said. And then after that, I just started streaming on Twitch actually too. Oh. So I started streaming on Twitch just right after it changed from Justin TV to Twitch. So it was like right in the early stages of that platform. Yeah. So at that time there was no art categories. And I was actually making Dota 2 cosmetic items. And so I was into Dota for a while playing. And so I started doing the Steam Workshop stuff, and I was streaming it on Twitch. And so, you know, I was like trying to make some side money there as like my side hustle, right? I had 3 jobs at the time. I had streaming, Dota, art. I was working on Mold 3D, and I had my full-time job at DreamWorks. So if you can see there's a pattern here, I work a lot on different stuff. I hear you. And so, yeah. And so I was like, I would be talking through my sculptures and my designs for these Dota 2 outfits. after that, sometime after Pixelogic, the creators of ZBrush, invited me to be part of their like official ZBrush streaming team. So that I was streaming on the Pixelogic Twitch for a while. That was like in 2016, I think it started. 2017. If I, it could be off on my dates, but it was around then. So yeah, I guess I just got really used to sculpting and talking. And so as I do it now with painting, and I still do stream sculpts, it's more or less second nature of that process. So I'm just used to talking and doing at this point.
So now I'm really eager to dive into Clackeys and your journey for keycaps. How did you find artisan keycaps, and what was it about artisan keycaps that really piqued your curiosity and passion?
Yeah, the journey into the keycap world it's actually kind of similar to your story too. Is like I was building a computer for my wife. She just started her job. She needed a new computer, and I was like, since I built her a computer, it's so funny, like the way you come to these realizations. Like I built her a computer and I was like, you don't have a keyboard. Like I've always just had like these shitty keyboards laying around. I always had them, right? And I never really thought that it was like an interesting or a thing that should be upgraded. And then I just like, at the time I was like, Reddit was kind of like this is more or less new. Reddit was been around for a while, but it was really gaining some popularity. And I was like, oh, I wonder if there's a place on Reddit to learn what keyboard to get instead of going to your sort of, YouTube kind of, YouTube or just like a generic Google search. So I was like, is there a Reddit for keyboards? Boom. I found our mechanical keyboards. And at the time it was like 60,000 subs or something like that, right? It was
like 2016.
Yeah, there's actually 17? A timeline. I wonder what it actually was. It was pretty low. I mean, it was a lot for that time, right? But it was
compared to what it is
now. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe while I'm talking, you can tell me like do the way back timeline on that. I mean, what it was in 2016.
Yeah, let me see.
So yeah, I just stumbled across it and I saw cool, like amazing keyboards. What really got me into it was the photography of keyboards. So like one of my side hustles / hobbies was photography. So that piqued my interest. And then too, like some of the keyboards were just like beautiful looking, like really nice pieces of artwork almost. And then I started doing more digging on like ergonomics, and I was like, hey honey, you should get this, you should get a mechanical keyboard. They're really good for typing. And so she wanted to try it out. I couldn't find one to try. And then she's like, you know what? I just want like a wireless one. So just give me that one. So we ended up getting her like a Logitech wireless. One with like the little solar panel on the front of it. And she still uses it today. But I was like, well, if you're not going to get one, I'm going to get one. So I drove over to Best Buy and I grabbed a Corsair 75%. And that was like my first, mechanical keyboard. It's just one I could get immediately, And then I was like, I don't know. I saw somebody do a sculpture, a clay sculpture of an artisan, and they had it on their keyboard, and it was like a lightning strike moment for me, right? Like you kind of heard the story on my Tested interview. It's like, I was like, I could do that. Like, it was just like, that's exactly what I could do. I already have 3D printers. I already have a long history of character design and modeling, and like a pretty good technical knowledge on just working with like solid body modeling and tolerances and stuff like that, because I was doing figurines and stuff. So I was like, I could do that. And at the time I wasn't working. I already left Mold 3D. we were in the middle of renovating our house that we got when we moved. And I was kind of in this weird place where I didn't know what I wanted to do anymore, because I officially like retired from working. Like I wasn't working in production. I was doing some freelance work here and there for commercials, but nothing really motivated me to actually create models anymore, because I was like, there's no point. Because we're based in Davis, California, and there's no visual effects or game industry here. So the likelihood of me working for a studio is between 0 and 10%, as like a full-time remote artist. And my drive to really work in production anymore in general was pretty low. I was like really in this idea of like spending less time on the computer and working, and more time maybe just like enjoying life, because my wife was working now and I didn't have to work as much. So, but then I was like this aha moment, I can make keycaps. And then I accidentally started my business and I started making keycaps. And I did my first sale and it's either November or December of 2016.
To close the loop on the mech market before we continue.
Yeah.
At the time it looked like 100K.
100K.
And now it's almost a mil, like almost 1 million people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's only in 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
That's insane growth, which is one thing I want to touch on, the growth of the industry in general. Before that, how did you choose the name Clackeys?
So it was kind of like my business spidey sense kicking off. I was like, okay, if I'm going to make keycaps, I need a logo. I need a brand name. I need it now. I need a website. I need email. I need everything, because if this is a thing that I'm going to do for the next couple years, even as a hobby, you have to put it in a container. So that way, if Clackeys is a keycap company in 5 years, or if I'm making toys in 5 years, or if I'm making camera accessories in 5 years, you have this entity that you started that you can always rebrand later, right? You can always take that name Clackeys and do like doing business as, it could have been a production company for video games. Like it could have been anything. So I was like, I realized immediately that if I'm going to be professional and sell things on the internet that is like our products, it has to be under something that is not just my name, just to future-proof it. So like I went and registered the domain. I don't know why I came up with the name Clackeys, but there was like, MX Blues were like basically the meme of the mechanical keyboard, like subreddit, like is between MX Reds and MX Blues, and everyone was really into like annoying their coworkers with how loud they are, right? So like there's just the word clack, and then keys was like a natural fit. And I just like found it. I looked it up, make sure nobody else was using it, and I grabbed it, And then I went from that to like domain registry, trademark registry, copyright, and email, YouTube. Like I did everything at one time. Just went across the list. I found everything that I could and grabbed it all. And I was like, that was a good thing for me, is like that all of it was free. Like if I would have found like clackeys.com was taken, I would have picked a different name, because the worst part is having a name that you brand your company as and then have it being a domain that you can't get, because, it's not a big deal when you're really small, but if you ever get bigger, it's just like a struggle. So, so I just wanted to make sure I'm not stepping on toes. It's available. So I grabbed it. Yeah.
I mean, it's so clean.
Yeah, it was a clean name, and the name kind of, so the full name when I started was Clackeys Brand Keycaps, and it was a kind of an ode to like one of my favorite jeans manufacturer is Lucky Brand Jeans. So I kind of followed that cadence of naming style of like, this brand, that. And I was like, okay, if I ever do anything else, it'd be Clackeys Brand, something else. But we kind of just low key just go off of Clackeys Incorporated now, and it is what it is. Names kind of lose meaning after a long time. Like Clackeys might be synonymous with,
like high quality work.
Yeah, like who knows, right? Like
yeah.
Like the word Amazon is not no longer a rainforest; it's a store you buy shit. Or like Target is a storefront, not something you shoot at with a bow and arrow, right? And there's a little bit of history there of their name, but like the associations get very broad over time.
It's like, how do people relate to your brand? How do people relate to you? And also what you create.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned when you first dove into keycaps, when you found this, you noticed it was primarily clay sculpts. And this was one thing that was very apparent for me at the time too. As I mentioned, I had this background sculpting in high school, so I picked up a little synth to throw some clay on. And you're coming from this background with a swath of experience, a wide range of expertise from the digital side.
Yeah.
How was that introduction? Did you get any feedback as a 3D artist coming into Artisans, or did you feel it was just a natural transition?
It felt really natural, and the only thing that I did notice that there was a clear bias towards clay sculpted artisans, and like as people call them, 3D printed artisans. And but at this point I had really thick skin, so like I'm used to like James Cameron telling us as a modeling team that our stuff is trash. Like I don't really care what like the internet pool of a few thousand people who don't really know anything about our work say in their opinion of what is our work and what is not not an argument that I would ever engage in anymore. So it's so like seeing that bias kind of hit pretty early on, it was to be expected, because that bias is not new to digital artists at all. Like there was years of 3D sculpting like becoming a main platform for art expression, where traditional clay sculptors and would talk how like what they're doing is not artwork, or what they're doing isn't real. Like there's and throughout history there's always this what I'm doing is more real to the form or artwork than what you're doing. I imagine like people going from sculpting in marble to sculpting with clay, right? Like the guy with a chisel, it's like, oh, you get to move around your medium. I have to use a hammer and a chisel and a stone to carve it out of this big block. So, you're just your work is easy. But so like, I don't know, there's this stigma that still persists across a lot of formats, but so coming into the keyboard scene as a digital artist and maker definitely had its like fog, I guess you would say. But it didn't really bother me, because I knew that like I knew my level of expertise as a digital artist, and then I also knew what my potential was to bringing designs to this medium, this format of expression.
I see similarities between the marble sculptor with their chisel, where the chisel is the tool for them to express their creativity, whereas the clay sculptor's tool is very different from digital sculptors, but the process may be similar.
Yeah. Another good lateral is like people who paint 2D traditionally with like oil and canvas versus people who paint in Photoshop, right? That's another like clear line of one group of people working one way and in comes like a new way of working, and they're being like, digital tools are amazing. Like there's so many shortcuts. Things that take you 6 hours to do with a brush can take you 30 seconds, right, in Photoshop. So like people kind of confuse this, like the struggle to get to the destination is as a way to calibrate the value of this thing, right? But that isn't the case. The calibration is, how long has this person been painting in Photoshop, painting in whatever, been training their entire life to get to the point where they can even make something that looks good, no matter what medium that they're using. And you'll find that, you know, the person painting for 10 years in Photoshop versus the person painting 10 years with oil, they're both equally making amazing stuff with the tools that they're using, you know? And it's because of that 10 years of work, not because of Photoshop or not because you're using oil.
Yeah, it's not the time it takes to create the individual piece.
Exactly.
So much as the knowledge and expertise and practice of the 10,000 plus hours.
Yeah. And then, like, on that note, it's like people value a product when it's art. Like, you know, we'll maybe talk about this later. If, like, you know, people ask, why do you charge $60 to make an artisan? Why do you charge so much to make an artisan if it's just 3D printed? Versus why is somebody charging, they're charging, you know, $60 or more because they sculpted it out of clay with their hands, and they're putting that value on the struggle or the challenges that they face in creating that individual piece. But from the side that we work is, you're paying for 20 plus years of education and practice and skill to be funneled into one little object, right?
Man, here I am sitting thinking, it's so easy to compare, especially since we're in the same game. It almost seems like you're offering your caps at a discount. How I'm thinking about how I share my work, which I just find to be a little funny.
Yeah, I mean, pricing is always a struggle. Like, if you were to charge the real value of an artisan keycap, nobody would buy it. So, you know, you gotta understand, like, where that limit is. You know, it's like, if I drew a line on a paper, how much would you buy that for? Say I'm like moderately famous, you'd maybe say, oh, I'd pay $10 for that paint, that you know, 8x12 paper or 8x10 paper with a blue line on it from $10 from Robert. But if Banksy came over to your house and said, boom, here's a blue line, that would go up for like $1 million, right?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, people pay
right?
a lot.
Why? It is because of it's him, or like his, you know, or his company, or like, it's about the value isn't that that paper or that blue line. It's like the person behind it. So, you know, you really have to like think about it like that, and then that's where the pricing in your head might start to make more sense on any object that you ever want to buy.
Yeah, I like that perspective. One thing I've been thinking about recently, I kind of mentioned this earlier, is learning 3D modeling. And I mean, just the other day, I picked up a new sculpt and have been, as you say, struggling and going through these hours of what may seem to be simple details. And I've heard you speak on the advantages of 3D modeling software, where some sculptors may take an entire week to create a small detail like a nose, whereas I imagine you can just knock that out in digital. Mm-hmm. I was curious, what are your thoughts on other advantages of 3D modeling over clay sculpture?
Yeah, I mean, I think advantages are really hard to compare, but I think the best way to look at it is, what is your goal? So, like, if your goal is to make, let's just say with clay, if your goal is to make something look like geometric in design, like very like flat faced, kind of very sharp edges, and almost geometric. And then you have tools we have your clay tools like knives to like cut these shapes out. If you're getting the results you want to get with clay, then the digital won't really have anything to offer you, because it'll be harder for you to get those same things because of your lack of experience with digital medium. So the way I look at it is, when I look at a clay sculpture of, like, say, my competition, I look at it and I don't think that if I were to do it, it's better. It would just be different, because a model that you make out of clay is going to be inherently less detailed and less nuanced in certain ways than you can achieve in digital format. So for me as an artist, I'm like very, very much into nuanced details. And so when I work on a sculpture, it would be the equivalent of you taking your clay sculpture and putting on, like, wearing a telescope on your face and zooming into like the nose of that character and then sculpting with microscopic tools, right? Like, you have that ability to, when you're working in digital, to basically infinitely zoom and infinitely add detail. So what I do with my art is when it's appropriate, I want to add details that are like not really achievable in a realistic way with clay. And that is part of the, one may say, advantage, but it's more like it's what I want to do, right? I want to add these details. This is why Pixar actually didn't do digital modeling for so long, because a lot of their character design was very much simplified shapes. So like, you take a human, if you take a photograph of like a naked person and you photograph them and you convert their photograph into like a black and white silhouette, there's tons of little nuanced shape changes from top to bottom. But if you were to like have Pixar do it, from like the thigh, from like the knee cap to like your waist is one arc top to bottom. But like on a real person, there's like 15 arcs that change and overlap, right? So their goal is simplification. And so like creating those simplified shapes is really easy to do with clay. It's really easy to smooth. Like, it's like body work on a car, right? And so, you know, they use the medium to their advantage. And so with digital, for me, I like details. I like pushing the what's possible. With the 3D printers that I have, they're able to reproduce details that are almost impossible to see to your human eye, in that you would notice them, but they're still there. We have a keycap that I did a long time ago called the Kiss Key, and like it's just a pair of lips, and like the lip lines, like each individual line of like the wrinkles are in there, right? And the printer actually replicates that. So as long as I can get the machine to replicate what I get to design, then I'm happy. So yeah, it's really about choosing the right tool for the job, or right tool for the intention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like starting by asking myself, what is my goal? What is my intention? What do I want to create? And then choosing the right tool to implement that.
Yeah.
It just seems to me like a natural progression for creation, even outside keycaps.
Yeah.
Like how you give the example of Pixar transitioning to digital. And I guess I'm maybe thinking in ways like, how can I build tools? How can I learn things that will maybe even transcend keycaps if something else sparks my motivation or interest down the line?
Yeah. You know, there's a lot of room for both kind of mediums to overlap. Like Sideshow Collectibles does a lot of digital with traditional sculpting. I mean, this sounds crazy, but could you imagine a workflow with some of these high-end toys? They'll sculpt it, digitize it, resculpt it again, add all the crazy details that you can do in digital, print it out in wax, cast it into clay, sculpt it again, and then make your final cast out of that to make copies of, right? So people kind of really get this rigid mindset of like, you got to do it this way, or this is the best way to do it. But like, when you're a professional and you're in these industries, they don't give a shit about this, like one method is better than the other. You're going to use every method that you can and every tool that you can to make the best thing that you can, right? And so, like, because I don't have like a really close relationship with clay, because I've spent the last 20 years trying to get the best I can at digital, clay is not the best tool for me. And so like, I could spend hours and go back to school and learn how to work in that medium to be effective. Or I can continue to push myself in a different direction in digital, right? And so, and it just comes down to my intentions, like what I'm interested in. I'd rather honestly collaborate and or work with someone who's an expert in clay than that's done that 20 years and they just chose medium in clay to work with, than me trying to like do it at this point, you know. I don't have 20 years of time on my hands to learn another medium to be where I'm at now in a different process, you know.
Yeah, like develop one's own expertise with their choice of tools, and also being open to working with others who have expertise in other media.
Yeah. There's a sculptor, a clay sculptor that is, his name is Simon Lee, and he does insanely cool clay sculpture characters. And he's based out of he's in SoCal as well. You know, at some point he made the decision to like stick with clay, because he could have transitioned to digital back in like the late 90s and early 2000s, like all the other clay sculptors, but he stuck with clay, and he's like one of the best monster clay sculptors that are pretty like well known. He goes by the name Spider Zero, and so you know, every artist is kind of faced with this choice of like, do I transition to some other medium, or do I stick with what I got and get so goddamn good that like nobody's going to touch me, you know? And so I don't know if I have that ambition necessarily, but more or less that's where I'd rather go than try to go into a medium at this point, you know?
I hear that. Simon Lee, I'll definitely check him out. I mean, you basically described what I feel is the crossroads I'm at, like making this decision to choose between digital, physical, the software, clay.
Yeah. And there's no reason why you can't use both. You know, again, it's like if you model, if you wanted to have a character that's clay sculpture and even one little piece is 3D printed, because it's like you can achieve that piece better in digital and print it out, then that is the way to go with that thing. You know, if you want to print out a walkie-talkie, right? Something retro, right? Hard surface, very detailed, little buttons with the play and pause and the volume knob and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Sculpting that in clay just doesn't make any sense at that scale, right? It's just kind of ridiculous. And unless you like simplified it to be like impressionistic, like it kind of looks like it, right? So like digital would be a great medium to achieve that little detail, and then you could add that to your overall sculpture. There's nothing wrong with combining the two forms.
Yeah, that makes sense. Getting back to your process with Clackeys, was there ever a time, I mean, you have an incredible assortment of sculpts and colorways. Was there ever a time where you thought of an idea or completed a design for a keycap and you felt especially inspired or that it resonated with you? And if so, what did the process look like going from the idea to the final product with that?
Yeah. I think, you know, this kind of hits like a few, there's a few things to note on this idea of like making stuff for me versus making things for sale. And this is like the inherent issue with having a company and having something that you want to sell to the public. So, you know, most of our keycaps, our most popular ones, are designs that are clearly inspired by other entertainment sectors, right? And so, and then in our journey, there's been a handful of keycaps that I kind of said, this is what I want to make. And so the ones that I want to make aren't going to make the company enough money to grow. They'll make, you know, there'll be enough money. It'll be nice. It's like a nice side hustle. But like, because we're not, like, I'm just saying Banksy again, you know, because we're not the Banksy of keycaps, I can't just like put out a design that's something like ridiculous and expect to be royally rewarded for it because it's mine or because it's ours. So, you know, there's this constant balance between making sure that we're making enough money to grow as a company and feeling that need to be an artist and create things that are like truly my concept or my idea, and feeling that fulfillment through artwork. And so as I grow Clackeys more, it's actually kind of sad, but I've actually found myself full circle in back to production where I'm no longer making my own art anymore. I'm making things that are for some other grander vision or need or scope of artwork, where it's like, you know, we collaborated with Riot Games to make an artisan, and it's like their vision of a keycap, not my vision of what a Riot artisan could be, right? And there's nothing wrong there, but it's like, it's really interesting to me that it's like I've gone full circle to no longer creating my own artwork anymore. It's creating other people's designs, right? So, you know, it is extremely difficult to be successful as an artist and only sticking to artwork that is, let's just say, only is like 75 to 85% your idea, right? Because nothing is truly like uninspired by other medium or ideas, right? Like, you know, everything that Blizzard's ever made was clearly inspired by like D&D and you know, other stuff like that, right? And StarCraft is clearly inspired by like aliens, right? I mean, it's like you can clearly see people get inspiration and then kind of make it their own, and then over 10, 20 years now it is their own idea. It is like inherently their artwork. Nobody really sees it as it was inspired by this unless you really go digging. So I guess to get back to that is like, if you really look at the library of work that we've made, whether it's inspired or our own, or genuinely our own, you can see that a lot of it has been very like retro or old or childhood. Like I'll just reference like the Goonies.
Like nostalgia
is the word I'm looking for. So like a lot of the stuff that I did that was very nostalgic was very like satisfying to me, because it gives me this like sense of like classicness or history and things that I grew up enjoying. And so like making those nostalgia pieces were particularly fun because I feel like it was more true to like myself than like we'd done a keycap like what was it? I think it was like a year ago. Like Fall Guys got really popular, right? And like as a company, we're trying to tread this line of doing stuff that's inspired and cool, but also relevant, right? So like we did like a really quick Twitch session where we sculpted like 3 different Fall Guys outfits. Or it was one character and I think I painted it 3 different ways. But anyways, it was very relevant. It wasn't timeless. And it's like, it was fun. It was cool to like challenge myself to make something so like quickly. But, I don't find myself having any kind of actual attachment to that design or keycap. Yeah. When I do this stuff where I kind of do our own play on like, Goonies or, there's a Full Metal Jacket, was like an old movie where I did a PUBG like helmet crossover with Full Metal Jacket written on the top of it. It said Born to Kill and it had like the peace sign. Yes. Different type of helmet, but it's like a little bit of an ode to something very nostalgic. When I start to play with like this idea of modern and nostalgia, like to me that it's pretty fun. I did a Ghostbusters keycap.
Yeah.
So a lot of like if you really look at all the keycaps that I've made, it is literally the story of like my journey as an artist of growing up watching Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Toy Story, then getting into video games of like Counter-Strike and fast forward into like Overwatch and World of Warcraft and and now whatever's like at that point like my timeline stops a little bit, like I'm not much of a gamer anymore, and that just comes down to like a time thing. But the fact that I made a keycap, like every game was more relevant than StarCraft at the time, and I made a StarCraft keycap, right? Because or StarCraft inspired, the Hydralisk was one of our first creature sculpts that I did. And I was like, how can I bring the world of these like 16-bit, PNGs off of like, this game that's 10 years old or maybe more, 20 years old into like a new medium and cool. So that was like really fun for me. Is like, and when I design artisans, we have like I have like my own approach or my own strategy, if you will, is not so much how can I take this idea of a design and stick it onto a keycap to become an artisan. To me, that is like not as inspired as what if this thing existed as a keycap, right? If you go back in time, if it wasn't a person, but if it was a keycap itself, like the keycap is the character, and that is the format that you're working within, not so much of take a head or take a sculpt and stick it on the profile of a keycap. So, we try really hard to follow this, motto, I guess, or
it's like not mapping the design onto the keycap, rather manifesting what that design would be through a keycap.
If it were a keycap, yeah exactly. Yeah. And some things just don't work. Yeah, some things just don't work, and you try really hard to make it work, and you just got to say, nope, that shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, you mentioned your Hydralisk, and I feel like that's a great example of what you talked about earlier with your original desire and drive to create these raw and gritty design aesthetics, and the detail on that sculpt is incredible. Oh, one thing I should have mentioned earlier is everything we talk about will be linked in the show notes too, so that everyone who's listening can come back and click through to see your work and what's going on.
Oh, nice.
You mentioned one thing that really resonates with me, and something that's kind of I've been struggling with is balancing the ideas or my ideas of what I want to make versus what will ultimately help me have a sustainable business. And I feel like I've kind of hit this point where I've been focusing more on the production rather than the creative side.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of hear maybe some similarities to maybe what you said about how you're transitioning to, I mean, you have this incredible business, this brand now, and you're able to grow and have these insane collaborations. I mean, like you said, Riot, and I've seen Liquid, and you're doing all these key set collabs too. I guess my question is, how has this affected or changed your approach to keycaps?
Yeah.
Where now you may be thinking about it from a higher level where it's more company focused instead of what you may have originally started as an individual role as a creator.
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of good questions there. I'm going to go take a restroom break and then we'll jump back right into that.
All right, welcome back.
Thanks.
That was good timing. I could use the stand.
Yeah, I have a standing desk, which is I stand almost all day while I work. So been a big upgrade for me in my posture.
That's the play.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny coming back through the studio. It's like I talk about small wins sometimes a lot. You know, sometimes the creative things you get to do just change. They're not necessarily gone. And so like right now we're working on a keycap and it's one of our own designs, kind of in between the larger production. And I have a team of like, you know, there's 2 people out there on the floor, like working on color matching. And it's fun to kind of be a director, like a puppet master, if you will. It's kind of like this, you get to see like your child grow, right? Like this thing that you have, you kind of see the overall thing happening. And then you're no longer really like having to bust your ass on like the little things, and you just kind of help other people do great things. So
yeah,
right now we're experimenting with like 4 different colors of blue, you know, and trying to match like a certain blue for a keycap. And it's like, it's rewarding to see those steps up into like the success of like, we got the color, you know, and that is more or less my role now, less of like, so I still do all the keycap design. If it's, sometimes I'll do the modeling itself. Sometimes I'll hire a friend, to do the modeling if I don't have the time. And then I'll just more or less be a creative director on it. I'll, you know, give feedback, paint overs, those types of things. So I'll A/B between those 2 different things. And so, it really depends on like schedule and bandwidth and style too. Sometimes, you know, I'm pretty self-aware of like what my skill set is. And so there'll be keycaps that I'll be like, oh, I know a 3D artist that can like take what's inside of my head. I'm pointing at my head right now. Take what's inside of my head and make it into a keycap better than I can do it.
Yes.
Right. And so when we did our kind of like when Avengers was coming out, I wanted to do a baby Thanos. And I did a very, very crude sculpture of it. And then I reached out to my friend who did the Disney Infinity characters back in the day for Disney. I say back in the day, that was like 7 years ago, but it was a while ago now. So he did some of those Disney Infinity characters. And I was like, this is exactly how I can see the character going from a realistic version that they have in the movies to like a new style. And so I reached out to my friend Matt and I said, hey, can you make this for us? You know? And so Like I recognize where my limitations are, where I excel at, and where my weaknesses are at. And I could choose to like spend time getting good at that style. Or I can find someone who's put in those hours, put in the 10,000 hours to doing that style, and give them some money. You know what I mean? Like reward their work and their time for getting good at something that is a niche, rather than trying to steal it myself, like hoard it all myself. It's not about that. So, I reached out to him and I was like, hey, can you do this keycap design for us? And he's like, yeah, I'd love to. Right. So he did the design and it looks super great. Right. And it's like, it was as rewarding for me to do that project with, as a more of a creative overseer, and I got to do the painting on it, and he got to do the fundamental translation, design, interpretation of what a realistic Thanos looks like versus into like a cartoonified version. As a company grows, you have to really be self-aware of what you should be doing and what you should let other people do, and make sure you let go enough. As if you try to hold on to everything and every little component, I think you're kind of in this, you're going to be doomed for failure. I think if you want to grow, right? If you want to stay where you are and just make the money that you're happy making, then you can probably coast for a very long time.
Yeah. I hear you say first, just recognizing your strengths and weaknesses and understanding how that can help or hurt the future with your business. It sounds like you have all this experience with development and production and are directly applying it to growing yourself and sharing your brand. So I can hear how you're able to see that within yourself and also apply it. I mean, I know for me, that's definitely something I can take time to think about. I mean, I know a lot of it probably has to do with control. I mean, just my desire to even think I have a certain amount of control, which already may be...
control is an illusion.
Yeah. You nailed it. Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, that's one thing I can definitely sit with. And when I hear you, again, just recognizing your station and accepting your responsibilities and really savoring the small wins, as you say, it seems like a great way to stay motivated and continue.
Yeah. If you think more about your failures than your successes, then it's a dangerous place to go, because you find yourself unmotivated, depressed, wanting something different, leaving what you're currently doing to do something better, greener grasses syndrome, right? So, if you really kind of take a step back and appreciate the things you did succeed on, not to like always be just like patting yourself on the back, like thinking you're the best, but more like recognizing when you did do something that is successful, whether making somebody else happy that they got to do something cool, or you coming up with a genius solution to figuring out a problem. If you really categorize these things in your mind as incremental things of success, then you're in a better mental state to stay motivated, because your brain feeds off of that. When you're in the long game, like Clackeys is in it for the long haul, right? So like you got to really be patient. Like when you fail, you have to you really have to just recognize it real quick, but start working on the solution and not dwell on that failure. This is where I find myself at this, like a differences in personality. Some people will fail and let it eat them away, and they'll be like angry and they'll lash out, and they'll be very upset at themselves. They'll take it very hard, and like their work will suffer for like X amount of time, I should say, versus I think I have this, it might be like, it's good in some situations and bad in others, but like, I'm not really susceptible to feeling bad for failing. And this is what a lot of people would say, this is like a narcissistic tendency, or but a lot of like very successful people don't really care if they fail. They just keep going and keep trying to find the answers that they need. Yeah. And they're kind of unapologetic for it, really. I mean, if you think about a business failing, what are the repercussions of that? Hundreds of people lose their jobs. You know, entire lives are turned upside down. Like, there's a lot of fallout for something like a business failing. But the person at the top of that business says, shit, that business failed. What's the next business I can make that won't fail? Right? Like, It's sad, but also true. So for me, I'm always thinking about how can we keep succeeding? How can we keep growing? There's a lot of weight on our shoulders that, you know, I want this company to survive and keep growing and keep employing more people, right? And keep bringing our ideas, or, you know, at some point my ideas, but our ideas, this idea to the masses in more bigger and better way. And that's a big motivator, is not failing. Like, I don't want to fail, right? That's the big motivator right there. Not being afraid of it, but not wanting to go through it and not wanting to do it.
Word. I hear you say that there's this relationship between resistance to failure and narcissism, where oftentimes our greatest strengths are also closest to our greatest weaknesses. Mm-hmm. That mentality, man, I feel you. I'm sure it's helped you build what you have now.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, it's incredible to see what you've accomplished. One thing I was curious to ask that you kind of touched on it with the idea of failure. Yeah. I was listening to Alex Otos' stream on Keycast, and I mean, credits to him. Yeah. He's done a lot in his own right. On that, you mentioned that there was a period where you're really faced with this challenge where you question what your future looked like within Keycaps. And I mean, I've definitely hit that wall several times, and I was curious if you could tell me more about that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that question has hit me almost yearly since I started the company. And so, because we attribute success to financial gain. And so when you're married, you have a newborn, and, you know, we're very fortunate. We're pretty well off, but like, we still have our bills, right? So you attribute like financial growth and financial gain to your success. And so if we do a sale or we create something that people just like aren't interested in buying, and you're not getting those numbers, your brain starts thinking, should I do this? What did I do wrong? Is the next sale I do going to be the same or worse? Am I going to end up going out of business because the demand is gone? Like, you do get into this trap of thinking that this idea might not be sustainable. And now what really helped me is my ability and my ignorance, I guess, it was never about me. Like, it's not, am I good enough? Do I have the skills to do this? It was actually just about the product. Is this product sustainable? Is the demand there? Is there an audience? Am I marketing it the right way? Are people seeing it the way I see it? But there was never really a question in my head of like, am I good enough to do this? Or, do I qualify? Which was the reason why we're still here today, why we're still successful. Because I basically accidentally separated those two things out. Like, and so whenever I questioned, is Clackeys going to be around anymore? I think a lot of it has to do with it's them, it's not me kind of distinguished line. So if Keycaps stop selling next week, I'm not going to be like, I suck at making keycaps. It's because something else changed. That is not really something I have control of. And so every single time I did a design that was like, say, like yielded poor results financially, it was only a matter of time until we did something that was like, that hit the bigger numbers and like allowed us to grow and scale. You know, after you kind of A/B that a few times, you kind of go through those ups and downs, you realize that there's just the wave, and you got to ride it, right? So, and the problem is like what happens with some artists in general is you hit those low waves like enough times in a row. Like if you did 3 or 4 sales of really poor performance, it's really hard to get yourself out of that rut. And so, because from a company and an artist point of view, the only metric we have for if we're doing the right thing or doing good things is if we're selling or if we're getting like social media traction, right? Is our brand growing? If you're not hitting on either of those for a long enough period of time, it starts to really take you down inside. And then you really start to question, should you even be doing this, right? Should you start over, just go do something else?
It's like reframing your focus and separating maybe the emotional, like the ego, the relationship to yourself, versus what you're creating and how people see you're creating, be it the product or your brand, and understanding we have limited forms of feedback, which is pretty imperfect. That's definitely something, again, I find challenging. Even before getting into keycaps, I've had an aversion to social media. So it's like I'm already cutting off one form of feedback. I'm curious, do you find you get better or higher quality feedback or engagement on specific platforms or with certain efforts besides your sales numbers?
Instagram is probably like our biggest platform. We're not much on Facebook. I think I made a page just to grab it, but we never used it. For a long time, we're posting in McMarket, but we kind of stopped doing that. There was a point where I realized, like, if I post, X keycap is for sale and make a post on Instagram, let's just say we sell 50, right? And then I'd wait like 2 hours when the sales like stop rolling in, and then I'll go post on McMarket, and you'll get like 2, and you're like, where your audience is. It's really obvious, right? If you can really see where people are finding you and discovering you, it became a really obvious place to put our energy into. It's just keep the Instagram going. And so there was something that really helped me with this. I do have that aversion to social media too. It's like that love-hate, because it's like such a trap. Each platform things can be done, like great things can be done with each platform, and each of them has made some people millions of dollars and made them successful in new careers. And on the other side, it's ruined people's lives and people get really addicted to it. So trying to find that balance as somebody who would consider social media a necessary evil. I heard someone say that if you use the social media platform as a way to document your progress, then you'll be just fine. So I try to use Instagram as a tool to document the history and the growth of Clackeys and the keycaps that we make or the products that we make. And if I maintain that mentality and try to really filter out the noise and get rid of this, like what the algorithm is doing and what platform is really hot right now, if you get rid of all of that and just think, what is the best platform for me to document change over the course of years for our company? Instagram has been that platform for us. The only thing that's dangerous when it comes to having all our eggs in that one basket is that I was watching one of these like entrepreneurial type guys kind of talk about how Instagram is going to be the next MySpace. And so, and he's not dogging on Instagram. He's dogging on if your entire business is based off of Instagram, you're going to be in pain if that platform ever went away. Right. So part of me is like, shit, like our entire life is Instagram as a company, right? We started there. And so what can we do to future-proof ourselves as a company to protect that legacy and that documentation, to retain that customer base? Because as social media platforms diversify, I know we're kind of going off topic now, but as social media diversifies, as a company, as an artist, you're constantly faced with this, like, what platform should I be on? You know?
Yeah.
And the problem is they all suck for certain reasons. You know, TikTok is not a good platform for photographs. 90% of what we do is photography of our artisans. You either have the artisan or you have a photograph of the artisan. Making a video of a still life object is more or less uninteresting. When you think about what artisans are in their truest form is sculpture, right? Now, when you go to a museum and you see a sculpture, something three-dimensional sculpture, you photograph it. You rarely take your camera, you take your phone out, you don't make a video of it most of the time, right? So, you know, our documentation format is photography. So we got to use Instagram because I don't think there's a better tool right now to document in a photographic sense of what we're doing.
Yeah, this is right on topic. It's like, how do you engage your community? How do you stay relevant? And also future-proof yourself so that you can sustain over a long period of time.
Yeah.
And this kind of leads me to my next topic. I just recently saw you created a Discord, and that's a completely different platform to have a space where you can engage your fans and supporters.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. And I think that is that next step of like that's like our backup plan, if you will. It's like our what if Instagram died tomorrow plan, you know, which it's not going to die tomorrow, but we don't know what Instagram is going to do with their algorithm. We don't know if all of a sudden they're going to see our account and ban it, right? Like, who knows? There's a lot of questions there. So we're in this mode of like, we've built this audience. You know, we've grown to almost 12,000 followers on Instagram organically. Like, I think I've paid for one $5 ad for a keycap once in 5 years, you know? So like going from 0 to, you know, almost 12K without having any real major influencer say, hey, go follow these guys, you know, like I said, it's those small wins. Yeah, we're not as big as like on social media as Tiny or Teja, right? Like we don't have those numbers, but we operate in a much different space. Like for who we are and what we do, that's a big success, you know, and you got to really ignore the noise, isolate yourself into like what we've achieved. And we've documented our history of artisans. The backup plan now, or it's going to be more or less the future plan, but you know, I do have a goal of like, I want to get everybody who follows us on Instagram over onto our Discord. Like I 100% want that to happen, because when I post something on Instagram says who gets to see those pictures. They say 3% of those people following you will see your photograph. If you want 20%, if you want 50%, if you want 100%, you got to pay us. And I don't believe in that as a medium for a business. I think it's wrong. I think that the content creators of Instagram are giving your platform value. And if you want millions of people to use your platform, then you got to give credit to the creators, not the platform, right? So TikTok has like a different approach. They have like their like your discovery, and then you have a discovery component, and then you have your follower component. So like as of now on TikTok, if you follow someone, you see their content front and center every single time. Circling back to the Discord, in Discord, you can join the Discord. You're not only joining, to me, Discord is going to be, maybe my prediction will be off, but I've been pretty okay at predicting stuff. I bought Tesla at $20. Okay. So
let's go.
Yeah. And I almost bought like 5 Bitcoin when it came out. So I didn't, it's because I got, okay. So I got lazy and I just didn't want to finish setting up my account, but my mind was in the right place. But anyways, regrets. Discord is the culmination of TikTok, Reddit, and Instagram. It's everything. And Twitch. It's all of it in one platform. Maybe that's too much. I don't know. But the fact that a company or a person can live stream in Discord, you can have thoughtful discussions in Discord, you can post photographs in Discord, and you can do like presentations and screen sharing, and you can post photographs, and you can do expressive things like emotes. It has all of those elements in Discord, right? It's crazy. It's literally all 4 platforms in one platform. And that's not what Discord started out to be. Discord was a gaming tool that took over from what everyone was using like Ventrilo or TeamSpeak, right? Yeah. It was just like, hey, they made a tool that's better than these things, but look what it is now. Now it's a community, right? And now there's community discovery. So Discord is a clear winner across all platforms. And I really regret not starting a Discord sooner. And that regret is just because I know that I would have been able to grow the Discord like how the Instagram has grown. Like, look, where would it be today if I started Discord when I started my Instagram versus like starting it like last week, right? So you're kind of paying that price for being to the party late. But I think it was last week when I finally I've wanted to make a Discord for like 2 years. Like I made it a year ago with and then I deleted it, and then I made it again like 3 or 4 months ago with one of our mods, Mev, and we sat on it for 4 months, and it was like I was like, finally, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it, and I did it, and it's like the most ridiculous reason. I made a Discord the Discord went live because I was on Twitter and I saw a Twitter ad for Wendy's hamburger that they now have a Wendy's Discord server. And I was like, yeah. And I'm like,
if Wendy's has a Discord.
If Wendy's, a freaking burger company, sees marketing value and community value in a platform that is Discord, then I am like, now I'm not only kicking myself for not making it sooner, but now it's go time. Let's get this thing off the ground and let it grow. So, we're still figuring out what that Discord could be and what it should be. But now it's a platform where I can share content, share the growth, interact with the community, get feedback, and then obviously, be close to the customers, because like any symbiotic relationship, I wouldn't be here if we didn't have people to buy, and you gotta know that that value, right? Like,
yeah,
they're more important to Clackeys than I am, the creator, because I wouldn't be here without them, right?
I hear that 100%.
Yeah.
Earlier, you spoke of competition, and this is real. We're all creating the same game, maybe not catering to the same people, but we have a similar product.
Yeah.
How do you think about competition, and how does it affect your approach?
I try not to think of other artists and makers as competition, in that it helps me stay clear in my vision, because I feel like if you fear your competition, or let's just say another word would be like your enemy, if you fear your enemy or you fear your competition, it's going to cause you to do things that you otherwise wouldn't do. So if you operate within with some element of telescope vision, or like operate inside of your space, and you ignore the outside world just a little bit, it helps you stay more true to your original vision or your original goals. I don't care what other people are making as artisans, and not in a mean way. I don't care in that it allows me to stay creative, and I don't think of them as like infringing on what I'm able to make.
It's like almost caring more for your own drive, your own creations, rather than giving that energy to other people.
And not that, you know, I when I do see other people's artisans, like I do see other people's stuff, and I think, you know, oh, that's incredible, that's amazing design. Or I see stuff and I'm like, I don't know why that's popular, but that's not really, either of those distinguished opinions in my head are irrelevant to what we're doing, because that's like my personal opinion on what other people's artworks are, or, you know, designs are, versus like what other people want, you know. And then this goes back into like, what is art in the first place, right? There are artists that would say that some of the artisans that are available, whether they're mine or some are mine or some of the other people's, that's not art. And then some would argue that it is. So, you know, I don't really care for those labels in general. So just, I don't care for this is 3D printed keycaps versus, you know, resin keycaps. Like, I don't care.
I agree. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Like being able to distance yourself, or maybe not distance yourself, but understand how you relate to other artisans. Yeah. And you can still have an appreciation, but not let the negative emotion or fear influence how you approach your own craft or your own creations.
Yeah. I mean, there's been artisans that, I think Jelly Key is a great example. Like, they do amazing stuff. And when I see their stuff, my first reaction is I get jealous that I didn't, that like I didn't make that first. Right. So sometimes, and that's not with everything they make, but there's been a few things where like they did they do like an 8-bit series that I thought is really cool. You know, I did a 8-bit kind of keycap a while ago, right? But it wasn't like sculpturally interesting. It was like a Mario themed thing, which is, it looks cool, right? It's cool, whatever, but it's not like that spectacular. And so like, you know, they're going into the 8-bit realm of that stuff, and I'm like, oh, you know, like I could have done that. But then I really step back and like say, if I did that, then I wouldn't have made the Hydralisk, or I wouldn't have made something else, you know, because there's only so much time. And so you got to really like kill that, like that feeling inside of you of jealousy in a sense, and regret that you didn't go and do this thing that you also had a same but different idea to do. And just like appreciate that they're doing that and they managed to make the time to do something amazing. And that allows me to keep those blinders on a little bit and just be like, what's the next thing that I want to make, and how can I make that happen?
Yeah. You're touching on these ideas when you're reevaluating how you may have started out or initially approached these designs. And I'm curious to ask, looking back, if you were to give yourself a piece of advice when you were first starting out with artisans, what would you tell yourself?
It's a good question. I would say like probably don't let your ego get the best of you. And I think that because I come from such a strong entertainment based background, like I have movie credits, I have game credits, you know, and I've worked on this or that, you know, thing in the past. And it's easy to say that because I did those things should give me more popularity or like more clout or more respect. And so there's been times where like if I made something and people weren't feeling it, it's really hard to turn off that ego and say, like, you know, as brutal as it sounds, like, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm the expert here, you know? Like, how many billion-dollar movies have you worked on, right? It's really easy to get to that point in your mind when you have this legacy of work that in this body of work that you've done. Established artists in general have inherently a lot of ego with them. The problem is that if you're applying your artwork into a new format or a new medium and you're entering into a new space, you really have to say, sorry, dude, but nobody gives a shit what movie you worked on. Nobody gives a shit what games you made. Maybe somebody does, but really kind of forget about it. You're starting over into a new place, a new community. A bunch of people don't really care or know who you are. So you have to take their feedback and take it well, even if it's hard to do, because it's really hard to take feedback from people who don't know who you are or don't care or have no artistic skill or intelligence in the first place. Yeah.
That hits me. It's like recognizing and tempering your ego, or my ego. You kind of touched on it when you said, like, it's not about me, it's about the product. And I imagine you can expand that to be business, focus on the business, or focus on the community. Like, just taking a step back to reframe. Looking forwards, it seems like you're constantly trying to push the bounds for what's capable with keycaps. I mean, you have modular designs, you have customizable sculpts, you have RGB integration, just to name a few. I'm curious to hear what's got you excited now, or even looking forward to the future.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I have always had as like a thing inside of me to do something that I haven't done before. That's why I usually only spend a few years at any given movie studio in the past, is because I was so interested in trying different types of productions or different types of tools or working with different people. And so that has always been a big motivator, is to go different and try new things and learn along the way. So all through Clackeys was like a basic design. Then I taught myself how to hand paint keycaps. And then I taught myself how to do moving parts. And then it's like moving parts that are clearer now. So there's like that progression of trying new things and then small failures and then big successes. As we grow and become a bigger company, we've hit this weird spot where like we lose a little bit of the room to be as innovative because of scale. Like, it's easy to make 20 keycaps that move, but if we have to make 500, now we're talking like QC issues, consistency issues, manpower, timeline, like all these things start to arise. So, you know, it's unfortunate that we can't be as forward thinking because we're not as small. That said, every time I do a new design, I try to like really push that boundary in small ways that I can. And there's always other ways to achieve like newer and cooler things. So, for example, I'm working on a knob right now for the SAT 75, and I want the knob to have like a battery and like built-in LEDs, right? So like I want to bring RGB into the Artisan and not have the RGB be powered by the keyboard.
Whoa.
Is it gonna like actually make it to the end game? I don't know, but like at least I can go back at the end of the day and say like I tried. Maybe we're able to make 10 of them and they're awesome. As long as there's some element of staying true to what Clackeys was when we started, of kind of pushing the envelope in terms of functionality and form. Those are the things that I'm trying now. So moving parts are still always going to be part of the keycap. Playing with transparencies, playing with material changes too. So one of the biggest downsides with 3D printing is you're kind of locked into material types. So materials that can be printed. In order to explore, say, like something flexible, you have to go like, okay, well, are we going to go and get this piece injection molded, right? You have to start exploring different ways to achieve that functionality. So a lot of those are cost prohibitive for us a few years ago. Now that we're growing, now we can start to think about, can we afford $5,000 to have a mold made of this piece that we really want on one Artisan? That could be a possibility, right? You know, a few years ago, that's like, no, that's not going to happen. You know, we can spend $5,000 into one Artisan design, one piece of one Artisan design, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, it's crazy. So, so like now that we're kind of hitting a certain like growth and scale with our company, and we're able to say sell X amount of keycaps, we can start entertaining these ideas of different materials and different types of things like batteries and magnets is another one. You know, we started keycaps. We started doing magnets in our keycaps. Which one was it?
Before
our Apollo. Yeah, Apollo was.
Yeah,
I mean, I've had the idea for years, like literally a couple of years, but that was the first design that was like, okay, this is definitely going to be the magnet. And so we made a modular magnetic keycap that was movable, interchangeable, right? And it's all within a little scale, right? So, you know, that was a big win for us. And, you know, we've done hundreds and hundreds of Apollos at this point. Probably our most sold keycap, right? And the crazy thing about that keycap is that it was like, it's inspired by obviously like an astronaut suit from like the 70s, but like it is more or less like 100% our design, right? Like, you know, there's bits and pieces of elements of a classic spacesuit in there, but the final culmination of all those elements is our design through and through. So, you know, that was like an accident, and it also happened to be one of our most successful designs, you know, singular designs.
Yeah. I hear you speak on this dynamic where as you're growing, in a sense, you have to narrow your focus in what you're creating. But at the same time, the scale at which you're producing, developing, and growing also allows you to explore other avenues.
Yeah. I mean, like you definitely have to balance out like your production and like, you know, make a keycap that is like more simple, more like consumer ready, I guess you would say, like lower cost, still good. And then try to use the money that you make from that one to maybe do something the next time, have it be more innovative and more grand and more spectacular. So, because we're operating with like, we don't have funding, like we're 100% owned by ourselves. This business has only grown with the money that we've made from selling Artisans in Desmat.
Reinvesting in your company.
Yeah.
Well, man, I super appreciate all the time you shared. I feel like this might be a decent place to start wrapping up. Before that, I have a few questions left. One, I'm stealing from Guy Raz's How I Built This podcast. And on his show, he often asks his guests, what do you attribute your success and the popularity of your brand to? Is it more a product of your hard work? I mean, it sounds like you've put in thousands, tens of thousands of hours developing your craft. Or is it more of luck, be it timing or chance encounters? Could be a mix of both.
I think it's definitely like the hard work. I think the luck component is that I think because we were one of either the first or one of the first companies to make detailed artisan keycaps that were not seen before, at a more mass scale than some of the other earlier 3D printed keycaps. Because we were there in the beginning and basically defined what those keycaps could be, it gave us some stability in the industry that would otherwise be hard to break into now. Like, now it's easy to see people 3D printing artisan. And again, it comes into that competition thing. Are they competition? No, they're not competition for us, because there are so many things that we've done and so much that we've learned and to create and perfect our process that, like, it doesn't bother me to see other people making artisans and with any medium, whether it's 3D printed or clay. And I wish everybody the success that we've had. And because I know what it takes to get from where they started, because I was there on Etsy, 3D printing my artisans, till now, where we're 7+ employees. I think I put this out in either in Discord or a tweet or Instagram, but we've sold more artisans in the last 6 months of this year than I've sold the entire duration of our company.
Wow.
So, and if you think about like how we've been able to grow in the last 7 or 8 months, that is all attributed to luck, working hard, being at the right place at the right time, networking, goals, all those things kind of coming together.
And now you're at the point where, well, from my perspective, having a 3D printed artisan designed by you is quite a bit more valuable, knowing your journey, experience, and effort that you invest into your craft. And it's clear you're continuing to grow. And just to say, it's awesome to hear you're on an upwards trajectory.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's always a struggle because it's like, I know that with 3D printed artisans, we're very self-aware of like the pros and cons of different formats that you work in. So, 3D printed artisans have some inherent issues, like you have to paint them. They're not full color casts, right? So yeah, sometimes the paint will wear down. Sometimes you could break them, right? I think all artisans can have broken stems. It's not specific to us, but we do certain things to like mitigate those issues as best as we can. So the thing that I can hope the best of is like, don't think of it being worn down or even having a broken stem necessarily bad, because you being a customer, you buying that thing has been part of the growth of the company. It's like buying stock in a company, and you have something that will literally be never made again in that same way. Like, it's never going to be painted the same. It's never going to be designed the same. In a lot of our designs, there'll be a time where we no longer make X or Y design anymore, because we just want to keep making newer things and cooler things. So it is a little piece of history, even if it's maybe a little insignificant. It's no Monet, but it's our version of it, right?
Yeah. I might be misquoting you, but I want to say I saw something on your Instagram to the effect of food is temporary, artisans last forever.
Yeah.
And I hear that. Everyone is part of your process. Like,
yeah,
even expanding outside of the individual keycap, it's a journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, if you really try to think of it, maybe it's not a keycap. Maybe it's just a little piece of art that happens to be a keycap. You know, it really depends on the frame of mind and your perspective of it. Like, I have figurines from like Overwatch and Dota and League of Legends on my shelves, right? And those are, some of them cost $500, some of them cost $80. And they're all like manufactured with different processes, and they literally sit there and do nothing and collect dust. And who's that interior, like she helps like people reorganize their lives.
Yes. Marie Kondo or Marie Kondo.
Yeah. It's like, does the thing bring you happiness? And it's like, you know, do keycaps bring people happiness? If so, yes, then we're doing our jobs. You know, we hope to be continuing that journey for a long time.
I like that. And in closing, this is just an open-ended question. Do you have any parting thoughts, advice, or even asks you'd like to share with those who are listening?
If you guys stuck around for the 2 hours and listened to me about my journey into where we are now, like, respect, you have more patience than I do. So I appreciate the listen. And the asks are, don't be afraid to engage with us. We take feedback seriously. We take it to heart. We want to hear everyone's thoughts. We want you to be engaging with us. We want you to join our Discord. We want that community, because, you know, if the first 8 months of this year has been telling, we had, you know, these really big projects come our way that we were really fortunate to be a part of. What's coming next is like so much bigger than all of that. So, you know, we're trying to grow and we're trying to do things to bigger and better ourselves, and then bring more to the community, because one of the first goals of Clackeys was to bring the world of entertainment into the mechanical keyboard world, right? That's exactly what I've done, either by fan art, keycaps, or partnering with companies like Team Liquid and Riot. And it's only going to get better and bigger over the next like year. So if that's the reason why you even like Clackeys in the first place, is because we bring those nostalgic mediums over, and we work with companies, properties that you like, or, you know, we're making the fan art of those pieces. Like, we're only going to try to continue that in a better and bigger and more official way over the next couple of years.
That's awesome. And then just riffing off of that, for people to stay engaged, give feedback, ask questions, where's the best place for them to get in touch? We really enjoy like public communication. So anytime you can interact with us, either in our like discussion channel in Discord, or like tweet at us questions, or ask us things, or comment on things, or on Instagram in the comment section too is also okay. We're very responsive to public opinions and public questions, because it's important for us that our community sees that we care about our fans and followers and our customers. The only way for us to convey that we care is if it's done in a public format. So no, I don't want you guys yelling at us in public. That's not what we're asking for. If you have a real problem, like, let's get to the issue. Yes. We can fix it. We have an amazing warranty system. Like, you know, all our caps have, we can replace them. We can fix them. So, you know, there are things that we do, like that. So we have a contact us form on the webpage for any issues. Cause we're all about like this long-term relationship with our customer base. Awesome. And Robert, again, I just want to thank you, man. I'm so grateful for you making the time to sit down and talk, and to share your story and ideas, not only with me, but also with everyone who's been patient enough to listen to our talk.
Yeah, definitely, man. Thanks for having me on. It was great to finally meet you in person, and also a big fan of your artwork. So I'm also looking forward to see what you create next.
Likewise. And to everyone listening, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'll have links to everything we talked about in the show notes at onceitclicked.com. And for all of you who tuned in today, thanks for listening.